I never imagined it would happen this way. One moment, everything felt stable, like we were building something together, and the next, it was as if the foundation beneath us had crumbled, and I was left standing in the rubble, wondering what went wrong. Her words still echo in my head, even though it's been months. She said, "You're not worth my time anymore, so I stopped wasting mine on you." I still remember the exact tone she used when she said it, the coldness in her voice that made me freeze in place. It was a simple sentence, but it felt like she had ripped out my heart and tossed it aside. It wasn't the first time I had heard her say something harsh, but it was the first time it truly hit me. There was no emotion, no hesitation. It was just a statement, one that I should have seen coming but never did. We had been married for almost 7 years at that point. 7 years of building a life together, an apartment, vacations, inside jokes that only we shared, the kind of small things that made me believe we had a bond that couldn't be broken. But, like I said, I didn't see it coming. And now, thinking back, maybe that's because I was too blinded by my own complacency. The warning signs were there, though, weren't they? I just wasn't paying attention. It was subtle at first, small moments where I could sense something was off, but chose to brush it aside. I should have noticed when she started spending more time at work, or when her phone stayed glued to her hand, always hidden whenever I walked into the room. But I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know. I believed in the trust that had once been the backbone of our relationship. It's funny, because I never thought I would be the kind of guy to get cheated on. I always thought I was smart enough, or observant enough, to catch it before it got that far. But I was wrong. And the day I finally found out, I couldn't deny the sick feeling in my gut. It was a rainy Thursday when I walked in on them. The house was unusually quiet, and the air had that musty scent from the rain outside. I was coming home early from work for once, mostly because I felt like I needed to clear my head. She had been distant lately, and the constant strain in our conversations was starting to make me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. But that day, I just had a feeling. I didn't expect to find her with him in our living room. I don't know what I thought would happen, but not that. Not her, in the arms of another man, her head resting on his shoulder as they laughed about something I couldn't hear from the hallway. I froze. For a moment, I couldn't process what I was seeing. I stood there, hidden in the shadows of the doorway, feeling the weight of what I was witnessing slowly sink in. The man was someone I'd never seen before. Tall, dark hair, clean cut. The kind of guy who had probably been in her life for weeks, maybe months, and I hadn't known a thing about him. The world around me felt like it was spinning, my thoughts running wild. How long had this been going on? How could she do this to me? I don't know why I didn't confront them right then and there. Maybe it was shock. Maybe I was still in denial. But I just stood there, watching them, listening to their laughter, and feeling this suffocating realization creeping up on me. After what felt like an eternity, I backed away, retreating to the bedroom. My hands were trembling, and I couldn't get my thoughts together. The only thing I could focus on was the fact that everything I had built with her, everything I had believed in, was built on lies. And I had been too naive to see it. It wasn't until later that night, when she came home, that it all fell apart. She tried to act normal, asking if I wanted to watch a movie or have dinner, like nothing had happened. But I couldn't keep it together anymore. I couldn't pretend that I didn't know what she had done. I looked at her, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. Who was he? Her eyes flickered for just a second, too quick for most people to notice, but I saw it. The guilt. It was there, right beneath her facade of indifference. She took a deep breath and sat down, her shoulders slumping, as if she had just realized I already knew the truth. "Jonas, it's not what you think," she said, but I could already tell. The way she said it, the way she avoided my eyes, it was all a lie. A carefully crafted excuse. "I saw you," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I saw you with him. I know what's been going on." For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that screamed louder than any argument could. Then, she sighed, not in regret, but in frustration, as if she was tired of pretending. "You just don't get it, do you?" she said, her tone suddenly cold. "You never did. I've been trying to make it work for so long, but you've just been here, living in this little bubble. I've been telling you for months that something's wrong, but you just keep brushing it off. I've been stuck, Jonas. Stuck in this marriage, in this routine, and you just didn't see it." Her words stung more than anything. I had always prided myself on being a good listener, on being there for her when she needed me. But I had failed. I hadn't been there when she needed me most. And now, I was paying the price. I've been trying to make this work, trying to make us work, she continued. But you're not worth my time anymore. You're not worth my effort. I'm done, Jonas. I'm just done. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't want to hear it. But it was too late. The truth was out there, and I couldn't deny it. She was done, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed awake, lying in our bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where everything had gone wrong. She had told me I wasn't worth her time, and in that moment, I realized she was right. I wasn't going to waste any more of mine on her either. And that's when I made my decision. It was time to let go. Time to stop pretending that things could go back to the way they were. Because nothing would ever be the same again. I didn't say anything after she walked away that night. What could I have said? She had made herself perfectly clear. I'm done. Those 3 words kept ringing in my ears, like an alarm I couldn't silence. I should have felt angry. I should have yelled, demanded answers. But instead, I felt this strange emptiness settle over me. The kind of emptiness you feel when you realize you're standing at the edge of a cliff and there's nothing left to hold on to. I spent the next few days in a blur, barely remembering to eat or sleep. I wasn't sure if I was still in shock or if I had just become numb to the reality of it all. I tried to call her a few times, but every time, she ignored me. No surprise there. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had spent years with, had vanished. She was a stranger now. It wasn't until a week later that I saw the truth in full. I was sitting at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through my phone when I noticed something strange. There was an email notification from her account, and the subject line read, "Moving on." My heart stopped for a moment, the words blurring in front of me. What was she moving on from? Had she really moved on that quickly? It felt like a slap to my face. I opened the email, half expecting to find some closure, some explanation, but all it did was confirm everything I had been trying to ignore. The email was to someone named Michael. The same Michael I had seen her with that night in the living room. The message was short, almost too casual, and yet it cut through me like a knife. I'm done with him, Mike. Let's just make this official. I don't want to waste any more time pretending. Pretending. That was the word that hit me hardest. She had been pretending. Pretending to love me, pretending to care. I had been just a placeholder in her life, something to fill the space while she waited for something or someone else. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. But what was worse was the cold, detached way she wrote that email. Like I was nothing more than an inconvenience to her. Like all those years we spent together meant nothing. I stared at the screen for what felt like forever, my hands shaking. I didn't know what to do with this information. Should I confront her again? Should I demand answers? Or should I just let it go and move on with my life? I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to do something. But what? A part of me wanted to call her out, to confront her about everything I knew. But another part of me realized it wouldn't make a difference. She had already made her choice. She had already moved on, and I was left picking up the pieces of my broken heart. A week passed, and every single day felt like an eternity. I couldn't stop thinking about the email, about her casual dismissal of everything we had been through. I kept asking myself why I hadn't seen it sooner. Had she been checked out for longer than I realized? Had there been moments where I could have fought for us, but I was too oblivious, too wrapped up in my own world? But more than anything, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed closure. Not for her, but for me. I needed to understand how everything had unraveled so quickly. Why had she been so cold, so detached, when we had promised to face the hard times together? What had gone wrong? I wasn't ready to accept that she was gone, even if she had already made that decision. I wasn't ready to just move on without understanding the full picture. So, one evening, after another empty day of wandering through the house, I decided to confront her. Not by calling her, not by texting, but in person. I needed to see her face when she told me everything. If I was going to be torn apart, I wanted to feel every piece of it. It wasn't hard to find her. She had been staying at her mother's place, a few miles away. I'd been avoiding going there, hoping she would reach out on her own, but I knew it was time. I grabbed my keys and drove over, the entire ride filled with a suffocating silence. I had no idea what to expect. Would she be angry? Defensive? Would she cry? Or would she just stand there, like she had that night, completely indifferent to the damage she'd caused? When I pulled into her mother's driveway, my heart was already racing. I parked the car and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the front door, wondering if I should just turn around and leave. But I couldn't. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. I walked up to the door, my hand shaking as I rang the doorbell. It felt like an eternity before Amber opened the door, her expression unreadable. For a moment, neither of us said anything. She looked at me, and I looked at her. She didn't invite me in. Instead, she just stood there, almost waiting for me to speak. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Amber hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let me in. There was a strange stillness in the air, as if everything had been said without words. I followed her into the living room, and she sat down on the couch, her eyes avoiding mine. I stood there for a few moments, taking it all in, the soft hum of the television, the silence that hung between us like a thick fog. "I know about Michael," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Her face didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. She didn't look surprised, and that was enough to make my stomach churn. She had known I'd find out eventually, hadn't she? "I'm not here to fight," I continued. "I'm not here to make this harder. I need to understand, Amber. I need to know what happened to us." Her eyes finally met mine, but there was no softness there, only exhaustion. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice almost monotone. "I've been trying to make it work for so long. I've been telling you, for months now, that things were off. But you just kept pretending everything was fine, like we were okay. You never listened, Jonas. You were always so caught up in your own head, in your own routine, that you didn't notice how miserable I was." I stood there shocked. "Miserable?" I repeated, my heart sinking. "I thought we were happy. We've built something. We were building something." She shook her head, almost like she was pitying me. "You were happy, Jonas. But I wasn't. I was suffocating. You never saw me. You never saw the woman I'd become. You were too busy with your own life, your own work, your own everything. I wasn't even a priority anymore." Her words hit me like a brick. I thought I had been a good husband. I thought I had done everything right. But I hadn't. I had been so caught up in my own little world that I hadn't seen the cracks forming in ours. "You think I wanted this?" she continued, her voice rising slightly now. "Do you think I wanted to fall in love with someone else? I didn't. But you stopped seeing me. You stopped hearing me. And after a while, I just couldn't keep pretending. A part of me wanted to shout, to argue that I had been there, that I had been trying. But I couldn't. The truth was, she was right. I hadn't been paying attention. I had been too absorbed in my own routine, in my own needs, that I had let her slip away. "So, Michael?" I asked, my voice quieter now. I couldn't help it. The thought of her with him, the man who had become a stranger to me, felt like a weight around my chest. Her face softened for a moment, but only for a second. "He was someone who listened, Jonas. Someone who made me feel like I mattered. Someone who didn't just exist next to me. Someone who cared about me. It was never supposed to go this far, but I couldn't help it. It's been going on for months." I could feel my anger rising again, but there was no point in trying to fight it. I was already losing. "So that's it?" I asked, barely able to look at her. "You just gave up? Just like that?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I didn't just give up, Jonas. I waited. I waited for you to see me. But you didn't. And now, I can't keep pretending that this is okay. I'm sorry, but I can't do this anymore." And just like that, the last shred of hope I had clung to evaporated. I had never felt more alone in my life. I didn't know how to process what she had just said. The words hung in the air, suffocating me. I had expected anger. I had expected tears. But not this cold, matter-of-fact dismissal. It was as if the woman I had loved for so long had already disappeared, and I was left standing in front of a stranger. For a moment, I just stood there, trying to make sense of it all. Amber had waited for me to see her, she said. She had waited for me to wake up, but I hadn't. I had been so wrapped up in my own world that I hadn't noticed her slipping away until it was too late. "So what now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Amber's eyes softened, but only for a second. "What do you mean, what now? I'm done, Jonas. I'm not coming back." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. This was the moment I had been dreading and avoiding. I had to make a decision. Did I fight for her? Did I try to salvage what was left? Or did I let go, as she had already done? But how could I fight for something that had already slipped through my fingers? How could I fight for a woman who had stopped fighting for us a long time ago? "I'm sorry," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I wasn't enough for you. Amber didn't respond right away. She just looked at me, her eyes empty of the warmth that had once been there. It was like everything I had ever known about her had vanished. And in that moment, I realized something. I couldn't keep begging for something that was already gone. I couldn't keep fighting for a love that she had already abandoned. So this is it then? I asked, my voice a little stronger now. You're just walking away? She nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. I don't know what else to say, Jonas. I've made up my mind. I can't keep pretending. A wave of anger surged through me, but I swallowed it down. There was no point. This was her decision. She had already made it clear she wasn't coming back. I guess I have no choice then, I said, my voice colder now. I can't keep chasing someone who's already gone. Amber didn't argue. She just stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. It was like she had already checked out, like she had already moved on. There was no drama, no grand final confrontation, just the quiet realization that we were done. I walked out the door, my mind spinning, my heart heavy. It was over. The days that followed were a blur. It felt like I was walking through life in a daze, moving mechanically, doing the necessary things, eating, working, breathing, but never really feeling anything. I didn't know where to put all the pain, all the anger, so I buried it. I buried it deep inside me. Amber was gone, and I wasn't sure what to do with myself. The house felt empty. The silence between the walls felt suffocating. I'd never realized how much her presence had filled the space, even when she wasn't saying anything. Now that she was gone, the quiet was overwhelming, like a constant reminder of everything I had lost. I tried to distract myself. I buried myself in work. I spent my evenings at the gym, trying to work off the restless energy that kept building inside of me. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the truth. The truth that she had moved on, that she had already given up on us while I was still trying to hold on. I kept thinking about that night, the way she looked when she said, I'm done. Her face wasn't angry. It wasn't full of regret. It was just resigned, as if she had already come to terms with everything, and I was the one left struggling to understand what had happened. She had already made peace with her decision, while I was left trying to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer existed. It didn't help that I kept running into people who knew her. Friends, acquaintances, even random people at the grocery store who would ask how I was doing, how we were doing. They didn't know. They didn't know that the woman they thought they knew was no longer the person I was married to. I felt like a fraud every time I had to smile and say, we're fine, when all I wanted to do was scream. I don't know when it hit me, but one evening, as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the spot where she had sat so many times before, it finally sank in. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the fact that she had given up on me. She had stopped trying. The woman I had built a life with was gone, not just physically, but emotionally, too. I couldn't help but feel like I had failed. I had failed her. I had failed myself. And I hated myself for it. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but there was still a part of me that wanted her to come back, to apologize, to say that she had made a mistake, that she had been wrong. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to happen. She had already moved on, and no matter how hard I tried to hold on to the past, it wasn't going to bring her back. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had to stop wasting my time on someone who no longer cared. I had to stop living in the past. But it wasn't easy. The hardest part wasn't accepting the loss. It was accepting that I had been the last to know, that I had been the one left in the dark while she had made her decision, quietly, without me. I had spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to make her happy, that I hadn't even seen her pulling away until it was too late. That's when it hit me again, the moment she told me I wasn't worth her time. I hadn't understood it then, but now I did. I wasn't worth her time because I had stopped being the person she needed. I had stopped being the husband she wanted. She had been trying to tell me for months, but I hadn't listened. I sat in the silence of the living room that night, finally allowing myself to grieve, not for her, but for myself. I was mourning the loss of the man I used to be, the man who had been so sure of his place in her life, so sure that nothing could break us apart. But it was broken, and I had to face that. The hardest thing was realizing that the person I had trusted most, the person I had built my future with, had already made up her mind while I was still hoping. The hardest thing was knowing I had given her all my time, all my energy, only to find out it wasn't enough. So, I made a choice. I wasn't going to waste any more of my time on someone who had already moved on. She had let go, and it was time for me to do the same. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight. But I started with small steps, letting go of the past, of the idea of us. I started spending more time with myself, focusing on things that I had neglected for so long. I worked on rebuilding, not for her, but for me. I was going to move on, too. And if I was lucky, maybe one day I'd be able to look back at this and feel grateful for the lessons it taught me. But that day wasn't today. Today, all I could do was keep moving forward. Weeks passed, but Amber's absence lingered in the corners of the house, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. I thought I was ready to let go, that I could move on, but the truth was, it wasn't that easy. Every time I walked into the living room, I expected to see her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, or laughing at something on TV. But the silence only reminded me that she was gone. The life we built together felt like a distant memory, a fading dream. One evening, I found myself standing in front of the photo wall in the hallway. A collection of pictures that once captured our happiest moments. Vacations, holidays, simple Sunday mornings. Each frame felt like a knife in my chest. I ran my finger over one of the photos, where we were smiling on a beach, the sun setting behind us. We looked so happy. I had to ask myself, when did things start to fall apart? Was it when she started spending more time at work? Or when I buried myself in my own problems and forgot to check in with her? I didn't have an answer, and that was the worst part. The unknown. The feeling that maybe I had been so busy trying to hold everything together that I missed the cracks forming around me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the one who had failed. That if I had been more present, if I had listened when she told me she was unhappy, maybe things would have turned out differently. But now it was too late. One day, I found myself picking up my phone and scrolling through our old messages. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was looking for something, some sign that the woman I married hadn't completely disappeared. But all I found were the echoes of her absence. Texts that once felt full of warmth now felt hollow. Words that had once been full of love now seemed like distant echoes from a past I could barely recognize. I had to remind myself that I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move on, even if every part of me resisted it. Even if the thought of her with someone else twisted my stomach into knots. But how do you let go of someone who was once your entire world? How do you stop missing the person who had been your everything? I didn't have the answers, but I knew I couldn't keep torturing myself with the what-ifs. The next day, I went through our things, our shared memories, the little tokens of our life together. It felt surreal, as though I was packing away a version of myself that no longer existed. I didn't know what to keep, what to throw away. It felt like every decision was another reminder that I was losing her, piece by piece. That was when I realized, this wasn't just about her. This was about me moving on. I wasn't going to wait for her to come back. I couldn't keep hoping for something that wasn't going to happen. It was time to let go. And even though it felt like the hardest thing I'd ever done, I knew it was the only way forward. But what was I supposed to do next? I didn't have a clue. For the first time in a long time, I was standing at the edge of something unknown, unsure of where my life was headed. And yet, somewhere deep down, I knew that this was my chance to rebuild. To find the person I used to be before everything changed. The person who wasn't defined by a relationship, but by his own strength. The hard part was accepting that I had to find that person again, without her. The weeks that followed felt like a strange sort of limbo, a place where time moved, but nothing really changed. I was going through the motions, checking off things on my to-do list, but nothing seemed to matter anymore. I was living in a world where Amber no longer existed, and I was trying to understand who I was without her by my side. There were moments, though, when I thought I saw a glimpse of myself again. A spark of the person I used to be, before the endless compromises, before the routine of marriage started feeling like a trap. One afternoon, I walked into the park by the lake, a place Amber and I used to visit often. I sat on the same bench we used to share, staring out at the water. It felt strange to be there alone, but also strangely freeing. For a long time, I had let myself get lost in her, in our relationship. It had been easy to do, to wrap my world around her and her needs. I had never realized how much of myself I had given away, how much of me had slowly faded into the background. And now, with her gone, I was forced to face the reality. I didn't know who I was anymore. But as I sat there, the wind carrying the faint scent of the lake, I realized something. I wasn't completely lost. The man I was before Amber had always been there, buried beneath the weight of our marriage. He was still inside me, still waiting to emerge. It was the first time I felt like I had the power to start again, to build something for myself. Not for anyone else, not for Amber, but for me. That night, I got home and decided to make a change. The place where I had once lived with her, where we had shared meals, laughter, silence, felt like a reminder of everything that was gone. But it was also a reminder that I still had the ability to reshape my life. I started small. I cleaned out a corner of the bedroom where we used to keep some of our shared things. Old photos, trinkets from trips, gifts we'd exchanged. I boxed it all up, carefully packing it away as if I were closing a chapter. It felt liberating, though bittersweet. There was no anger anymore, just an acceptance of the fact that it was time to move on. The hardest part came later that night, when I found myself staring at my phone. I had told myself I wouldn't contact her again. I had told myself I was done with chasing shadows. But there it was, her name on the screen. A message she had sent a few days earlier, an apology of sorts. It was brief, impersonal. I hope you're doing okay. I'm sorry for everything. I sat there, looking at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to respond, to reach out and ask her about the things I'd never understood. But another part of me knew that answering would only drag me back into a cycle I was trying to break. So I did nothing. I left the message unanswered. In that moment, I realized something important. The person who needed to change wasn't just her. It was me. I was the one who needed to stop waiting for closure, for answers that would never come. I was the one who had to stop seeking validation from someone who had already moved on. I had spent so much time looking back, trying to understand why things had ended the way they did. But I wasn't going to find the answers by holding on to the past. I had to look forward, even if the future felt uncertain. And so, with a deep breath, I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to wait for her anymore. I wasn't going to waste any more of my time on someone who had already made her decision. I was going to take control of my own life again, one step at a time. I turned my phone off that night, feeling a strange sense of peace. It wasn't a peace that came from forgetting, but from accepting. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like I was starting to heal. Months passed, and I kept moving forward, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments when I found myself thinking about her, wondering how she was doing, if she was really happy, if she had ever regretted what she had done. But over time, those thoughts became less frequent. I began rediscovering parts of myself I had forgotten. Passions, hobbies, dreams that had been buried under the weight of our relationship. I started running again, something I used to love but had abandoned. I joined a local photography class, something I had always been interested in but never had the time to pursue. Slowly, I began building a life for myself that didn't revolve around Amber. A life where I was the priority. It felt freeing. It felt like I was becoming the person I had always wanted to be, confident, independent, driven. I found new friends, people who respected me for who I was, not for who I used to be. And as the months went on, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace. But just when I thought I had moved on completely, life had a funny way of throwing one last curveball. It was a regular Thursday when I received a message from a mutual friend of Amber and me. It was a short message, almost cryptic. "Hey, have you heard from Amber? I think she might need help." I didn't know what to think. I hadn't heard from her in months, and truthfully, I wasn't sure if I cared. But there was something in the message that caught my attention, something that made me curious. I decided to reach out, just to make sure she was okay. When I called her, her voice sounded different. Tired, distant. It was clear that something wasn't right. "Jonas," she said after a long pause, I made a mistake. I didn't realize how much I hurt you, and now I'm stuck. I thought everything would be perfect, but it's not. Michael, he's not who I thought he was." I could hear the desperation in her voice, the same voice that used to comfort me, now pleading for help. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. But it wasn't sympathy. It wasn't the love I had once felt. It was a sense of justice, of knowing that sometimes karma finds its way, even if it takes time. "You made your choice, Amber," I said, my voice steady calm. "You walked away, and now you're facing the consequences. I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can't help you. I'm not the person I was when you left, and I'm not going to pretend to be." Her silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. I could almost hear the realization settling in. The same realization I had gone through months ago. She had lost me, and she wasn't getting me back. Goodbye, Amber, I said softly, and ended the call. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. The weight that had once crushed me was gone, replaced by a calm certainty. I had moved on, and that was the final piece of closure I needed. That night, as I sat on my couch, alone but not lonely, I realized something. Amber's actions had set me free. She had pushed me to a place where I had no choice but to rebuild, to rediscover who I was. In a way, she had done me a favor. She had forced me to look inward, to grow stronger, to embrace a life I had neglected. And for the first time, I felt genuinely happy. Not because of what had happened to Amber, but because I had finally reclaimed my life. I was no longer a shadow of someone else's choices. I was me, and that was enough. As for her, I don't know what happened. Maybe she found her way out of whatever mess she'd gotten herself into with Michael. Maybe she didn't. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had learned one of life's hardest lessons. Sometimes, the best form of revenge is just moving on. And that's exactly what I had done. In the end, the best thing I could do for myself was to let go of the past and embrace the future. And that future? It was mine to create.